Welcome to a new episode of Measurement Mashup, the podcast about data-driven decisions in communication. As always, we talk about corporate communications and how we can make the effectiveness of comms activities measurable and visible. This podcast is for everyone who is involved in communications and PR, who wants to learn more about communication and how it can be measured. We believe that data can make a significant contribution to improving the position of communications departments in the eyes of top management. In this podcast series, we want to talk about how to make that happen in a very practical way. My name is Steffen Rufenach, and virtually with me is Marc-Steffen Buchele.
I'm Marc-Steffen Buchele, and I have the pleasure also of welcoming you today here and spending the next few minutes with you. Today, we will talk about social media, in specific social media measurement, a topic that for many years is high up on the agenda of every comms professional and which has now gotten even more important with the use of artificial intelligence solutions. And we had some AI experts here in our show as well. And we had this discussion, what AI can potentially do. That it's impressive, but it's one thing to analyze what people are saying and something else to measure what we as a company are saying actually has an impact. A couple of days ago, CBS reported that half of all Twitter accounts are actually bots. And I think that's important to know. That means that they are only sending, but are not listening and therefore not relevant when we talk about reach, for instance.
Yeah, 50% bots, that's a very scary number. Let's not be very philosophical about that trend here. Let's talk about how we can measure social media, how we can measure the influence that communication has on social media. What we want to do is look at what are successful campaigns, how can I define what success means in social media, especially when outreach figures might not be as reliable as we hope they are.
With us is Julio Proano. Welcome, Julio.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm very excited to join this podcast, and I'm very pleased that you guys invited me.
Great to have you here.
Let me introduce you a bit, Julio. You are a senior manager for social media channel strategy at the healthcare company Novartis, a company that you worked for since 2009. Before joining Novartis, you have worked as a digital marketer and art director and in web design. You have a bachelor degree in engineering from the New York University and have worked in the US until 2016. In 2016, you moved to Europe and you are now located in the beautiful town of Basel in Switzerland. You're a real data geek, if I may say, and you're fascinated by data-enabled technology and innovations. And consequently, you're a big proponent of data-driven decision-making.
Welcome to our show, Julio.
Thank you. Actually, when I listened to you describing my experience, I am a little humble, but thank you. I'm very excited.
We are always interested in personalities who are addicted to measurements. You have worked as a comms expert in the US and in Europe and still back in the US. What are your experiences? Are these different cultures also in communications practices?
Yeah. I think that the best outcome, meeting people and learning about different cultures. I am originally from South America, moved to the US in my early 20s, went to college, worked all my life, my professional life in the US. But really working in Europe, it opened my eyes to feel that I felt like I really belong there. Here in the US, you always are different, right? So I think it's a fantastic experience for me was working in Europe. I think my fascination for data comes from the fact that I love patterns. That's my visual part. And then data is a conduit to actually find patterns. And I'm fascinated by that. So Excel is always my friend. Even though we have all these tools today that we can actually generate reports, I still like going old-fashioned, downloading data and creating my own charts and playing with it.
Despite there are a lot of tools, Excel is your favorite.
Yeah, at my job, we use different type of tools, but I think the ones that are more in tune with it, reporting, I think is Sprinkler. There's a really good tool that allows us to plan, also distribute the content, publish, engage, which is a big piece, and the whole communications piece is engagement, and then measure, and then interact again. So Sprinkler is my preferred tool, I would say.
Interesting about Excel is, from my opinion, that Excel is not a black box, right? You know exactly what Excel is doing. You know exactly what the data that comes out, how that was calculated, and how you have to interpret this. And when you visualize, you know exactly where that comes from, which is, I think, a problem with some of the tools that we're seeing these days, like Sprinkler, some of the AI tools, that we really need to trust what they're doing, even though we don't really understand what's going on in the background of them, right? So maybe that's why I also like Excel still a lot, because it's very transparent.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Stefan. And then this is one of the challenges that I see sometimes using these tools is that one, the tool is as good as the data that it collects. And sometimes the data is transparent when you just have these fancy dashboards in front of you. And then you look at these numbers and like, you don't really know why these numbers appear this way. But, when you go old fashioned and you have your own Excel data, you can do all your pivot tables, you can do different sheets, you know what's happening. I just like the control.
And this also works for this complicated social media measurement that we want to talk about today. The Excel file is huge and we have a lot of indicators from Facebook, a lot of indicators from Instagram. And how can we deal with it and how can we manage it?
Well, that's a good point. I think social media, as we're going to discuss more in depth, the big challenge is that it's not on a standard set of platforms. Each platform presents a unique approach, how they actually connect with audiences, even though there are some standards measurement units, KPI, reach, engagement, but each platform identify or actually analyze those units differently. So you need to learn that as well. The best way to do it is always to download the information they provide you. Then you need to understand how each of these platforms define these, let's call it KPIs. And then you need to build a relationship between those platforms. And I think that's something that Sprinkler does a pretty good job with. However, when we try to measure outcomes that may be a little more abstract, like in communications, I think is going back to your Excel is not a bad idea.
Julio, let's talk about your current employer, Novartis. So obviously Sprinkler, that's a name for every one of us. And even if you're working in a small company, that might be a tool that you came across. So it's good to know that also the big charts like Novartis are using these tools. But can you tell us how one of the biggest pharma companies in the world, where are they right now in terms of social media? What's the strategy that a big company like Novartis has in that area?
That's a good question. But I think before telling you that, I would like to tell you why we even in social media, right? So I think that's always the big question. If you think about it, according to Forbes, it's 97% of the top 500 companies are in social media, right? Or at least they have one account in social media. So our company is a little more, we have about 10, 11 years maturity with our accounts, which is pretty good. But then the question is always, so why we are in social media? Well, I think it's important to know that in 2020, there was a 3.6 billion people were using social media worldwide. And I think that's, if you think about it, that's almost half of the population of the world. So that alone, you would think, okay, that's great, but is really people using it? How are people using it? So the global average of the penetration of social media right now in those audiences is 53.6%. where you see Western Europe and Northern Europe and North America, the winners on this area for 79% and 74% penetration. With that said, how could you not be involved in social media, right? So I think this is impressive because it's always something to compare and to justify, because that's the bottom line for this is how communicators can justify the investment in social media, right? Do we need to be in social media? Is that something that is going to really return our money for our investment? I think that's the part that is always the big question. So the different areas of big companies, there's different applications, how you can use social media. In my particular area, it's more about the reputation of the company and how we build reputation and how do we maintain a reputation. And it's different outcomes. And I think this is something that the management, the company itself, the leaders of the company define what are our goals. And based on the top level goals, we define how we're gonna feed into that global or more general company goal.
That makes a lot of sense, Julio. But then there's also a very pharma-specific thing, if I'm not mistaken, which is adverse events. So you're basically by law also obliged to monitor what's going on in the social media world and see whether people are having troubles with the products that the company sells. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Healthcare companies and social media, right? What I can offer for these companies is that, you have real-time feedback. You can gain market intelligence, there's disease awareness, the brand promotion. But I think this particular piece of adverse events is mostly for us to make those products better and enhance and also preserve patient safety. And I think that's the most, probably one of the big outcomes for social media for us, that connection, that almost immediate feedback that we get is really priceless.
You already mentioned reputation and to maintain reputation. How do you measure and what are the most successful indicators that you see? Reputation is a big word, and we all know that there are some dimensions that you keep your eyes on it. What's your opinion on it?
Sure. So let's talk about my group. Our goal is reputation. And how do I build a reputation, right? It's interesting because every time everybody asks me sometimes, so what do? You do social media? I say, yeah, I build reputation. That's my job. That's what I do. And I'm sure that every content that goes out there actually builds that reputation. And he said, so why reputation is so important? Because we build in trust. Trust is the piece that actually connect all these different elements. And it's not just the trust of the company providing to patients, healthcare providers, or any other users in social media, but it's also to connect those communities, building that awareness of a specific disease. And the most important things for us is our science, because science is a really, really large piece of what we communicate. And it always brings a good connection and interaction with our users. Another topic is also global health and how responsible our companies are to the world health benefits. But measuring is a challenge. In traditional PR, there was a way to measure. It was your tier 1 publications and what was the penetration that happened there. Also reach, which I don't really like reach much because, as you said earlier, there's a lot of but, right? So how do we know we're reaching the right people? The first thing is to understand your audience very well. And for us is we have these top audiences. And if, for example, if we're talking about patients, for us, as you mentioned earlier, Stefan, it's, safety first. And we want also for them to share their experiences, and we want to capture those experiences and share them back. And also make them aware of it so we can empower them. That's the beauty of this particular line of communication with patients. And then you have, for example, healthcare providers. That's a bit different. You want them to engage with the patients, but you also want them to learn about the science and all these advancements that the company is investing on. So I think that's, I don't know if I answer all the KPIs questions or how you can measure it, because I think we can build a system together and then when we can discuss that in a different way. But whatever works for you, I think the most important is to establish your goal. Because even in a big company like the one that I'm working for now, each group is going to have a different goal, but we all have an overall overarching ultimate goal, which is in general is reputation.
Okay. And broken down in some dimensions, for instance, management and leadership or CEO positioning, or in patients that have problems with the products, broken down in these dimensions, and that you have indicators on all these levels, that you are monitoring the sentiments, for instance, about these topics in specific search terms and in keywords that you're searching for, and you're collecting this data and do you report these, for instance, to the communications managers or to the social media managers, that they can deal with it and adjust their communication campaigns, for instance? Is it like this?
Yeah, we do active listening. We do a lot interact. There's a lot of there's ongoing tools that we also use. For example, other listening tools. We also have a partner agency that support us a lot on that. But again, like I said earlier, Sprinklr does a very good job with that, because then you contain that conversation. You can actually set it up. We have other tools that different teams provide more input. But the challenge for communications, I think, is and on all these different measurements, is that we all based on sentiment, right? We need to report on the sentiment. What's the audience? What's this like? And then I think we have to be very careful when we read reports and say the sentiment or the share of voice. That's another big one. You know, we went to this Congress and we have this fabulous share of voice. Look, everybody talks about it, but was that effective? Was that actually productive? Or perhaps it was actually very negative. I believe that even negative comments are good comments, because that allows you to understand the real sentiment of your audience. And I think that's what you need to extract and then learn from it. I think that each company is going to have a different priority. I think that they need to stick to their priorities. And for us, again, in our world, what I'm responsible for working with these teams is mostly patient safety, and ensure that we can properly communicate that. We are constantly training on products and processes for us to how can we better answer to these questions. And if we get any of those inputs in social media, how do we channel that into the proper sections of the company? Social media, I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I can tell you, I get shift reports every 4 hours. And the comments are not every single comment is an adverse report. There's a lot of good content, but it's good for us to have the adverse events. It's not because it's good that something bad happened, but it makes our products better. And then we can improve the safety of our patients.
Thank you, Julio. You already mentioned that you're working with the different teams in the organization and that they have, sometimes very different objectives and targets. Can you explain us and the audience a little bit more about how your day looks like? So how do you actually collaborate with these teams? How do you help them? What's your role there as a social media channel strategist, if you will?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So the majority of our teams are fantastic communicators, right? That's what there's a lot of teams, a lot of experience with patient advocacy, right? Because of the nature of our social media channels, for us is all unbranded content. Pharma is a heavily regulated industry, so we don't really promote products or anything in our channels. It's about, again, our science, which we're very proud of it, and it's so interesting. So when this a regular day for me is somebody coming with a content and say, we would like to post, we have this campaign, it's a disease awareness campaign, a lot of those. And then we want to put this in these particular channels. I'll be like, well, let's talk about first your audience. But before even that, let me see, what is your main goal for this? Is this going to be actually You want people to have a particular reaction. They wanted to read. They're going to go to our website. So all these different things, you're trying to actually translate an actionable, measurable KPI into what that objective is. So they may say, well, I want to increase awareness. Great. How are you going to measure increasing that awareness? Is perhaps they click on the link on something, they go to your page, and perhaps we can read or we can measure how long they stay in a page reading your article, or what was the path that they follow in the website. And I think that's what I usually do. Now, some instances, you probably experience this also, Stefan. Some instances you offer your advice, but sometimes partners come with a predefined objective. It's a checkbox. I want to do this. This is what needs to happen. Great advice. I don't really understand much what you're saying. So can we just do this? And I'm like, okay, well, let's make it better. Let's see how can we improve it. So that's typically. And then of course that comes in, and then also need to look into, is this content in compliance? The tone is correct. And then obviously set up the content and hopefully start a new campaign.
Sometimes I believe that these awareness or engagement goals do not work without money on AdWords or on specific target groups that they can probably come up a little bit higher in their timelines. Is this also a topic that's important for the return on investment? Or do you think it's like, no, if you have good content and it's organic, that the only investment that we invest is our experience you already mentioned?
That's a very good question. And I think there's two different train of thoughts here. The more traditional, the more followers I have, the better my message is going to be. It's going to reach all these people because it's all about reach, right? So luckily, we do have a fairly large community. We are probably in the top 5 pharma companies on audience sizes and things like that. But what really is more important for us is our engagement rate compared to others, how people are actually engaging with that. So I think that's one train of thought, right? That size of that.
Is it most important to spend some money in AdWords, or is it better to think about best content to do some organic engagement in the healthcare business? For instance, is it specific?
Investment, how much investment? So let's just talk about communications, right? Or patient advocacy. For example, between July and November in 2020, Facebook and Instagram combined, it spent $350 million in the US. Just between those, I can tell you that we in communication don't spend that money. We don't. However, I'm sure that the marketing teams, meaning the brands teams, right? Those are the ones who really spend the money. That's where the actual capital goes. And I think that's what probably companies, especially healthcare companies, they probably need to shift a bit and actually perhaps make more investment on these type of communications, because it really will help. At the end, it's going to really enhance the product because, as you know, we're the one doing the listening, right? But also, I think it would have the return on investment for the overall ecosystem of the company.
Thank you, Julio. This is interesting. Let's talk about platforms maybe a little bit. So obviously, we have the feeling that there's a lot going on LinkedIn right now. I see that companies are discussing whether they should be on TikTok or not. It seems there's a new platform every other year that you somehow need to decide whether you want to be on there or not. What's your perception on that? Is it really necessary to be everywhere? Is it true that if I want to reach young people, I need to be on a specific platform, and if I'm not there, then I don't reach them? Is that like how do you see that as someone who works with all these platforms every day?
That's a challenge every day. You know how many times I hear said, why we're done in TikTok? Well, first of all, there is a business need or the business justification as it is. Proving our return on investment is challenging. So getting or introducing new platforms sometimes takes time. Do we think that that could be a good way to do it? Yes, we could. Actually, a lot of companies try it. A lot of companies consider TikTok is a perfect example. TikTok now is what, number 6 on penetration, so number of followers. But what I suggest, if I'm just joining a company or let's not say pharma, just healthcare company, I say, let's just stick to the big guys. I mean, why not? So, Facebook and YouTube, the largest, 2.8 billion, 2.3 billion reach. You cannot beat that. I mean, TikTok is 732 millions. Maybe I'll wait until it's 1.1 billion and then perhaps we can consider. But in the meantime, I think that's have to do with how are you going to approach that? Having like a particular prioritization of your return on investment. But more importantly is understanding that audience that you want to reach and then defining that message that actually reaches it. And the only way to do that is through testing and listening, and something that I have to admit, I think that we don't do enough. I wish we can do more is engagement.
And always optimizing all these contents
absolutely
to reach the goal, the target that you have selected for this specific audience and what you wanted to do on your reputation dimension, for instance. I think that's the important point, that it's always based on the goals that you have to reach with, that you want to reach with your channel strategy, and that you have always in mind the indicators showing how we have reached our goal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the regular marketing funnel, applies to every industry. It's the perfect funnel. So you have these phases. And I think big companies do not spend enough time on phase 1, which is actually nurturing, understanding, feeding those audiences, and then learning from that, listening. So that phase 1 is usually skipped.
They come across with just give our content to all of them. They are not specific. They don't mind the really important target audience for this content.
Absolutely. I have to say, the new management that I'm working with, it was an evolution for us. Our channels were always busy with tons of content. The voice was not consistent. And again, you are the face of the company. Guess what? Everybody from the company wants to use you to present their messages. So this is something that the new management really, decided to filter more of that information. In the beginning, we were like, well, we're not publishing that much anymore in LinkedIn. We're not doing this in here. We're not doing there. What's going on? And yes, sometimes we go a little quiet. But interesting enough, our audience in general continue growing. By the way, your followers is a separate audience, not the audience that you want to reach always. Remember that. That's very important to remember. So our audiences continue growing, which was so interesting. Our engagement rate actually remained the same or above, and compared to other companies that they were probably publishing double of what we were publishing, they actually were doing well. So there was something to say about quality against quantity.
Julio, quick question on the channels again. So like when we talk about different platforms, we also talk about different ways of how the content is presented, right? So when I say TikTok, why are we not on TikTok? TikTok is a video platform, so you would need to produce your content in a different way. And maybe it's easier for companies to say, yes, we're on LinkedIn, let's publish our stuff on Twitter as well, because it's text basically, or maybe it's combined with a picture. So moving to a platform that is basically using the same content format is easy. But then the question of video producing or TikTok is, is there a need for video content that people want to consume? And you could also do that on LinkedIn, or you could do that on other platforms producing videos, right? You don't need to be on that channel. But how do you see that? I mean, for a pharma company, is video really the right way of conveying information? Is that something that you need to do? Is it something that's easy for you? Do you even want to go that way?
Well, there's a few questions in there. So the number one, format, video for sure. Video is the winner. you can tell that all the platforms are jump on the wagon on video. I mean, I remember the days that there were no possibility to put videos in LinkedIn, right? Think about that. So for sure, video is the way to go. Now, I don't want to talk about any particular platform and say that it's good or not, because it depends on your goals, depends on your audience. But let's take, for example, TikTok, right? TikTok's format is almost like a story type, right? Which other platforms have explored. Facebook and Instagram, they're stories, right? If you think about it, that's kind of what actually Instagram did with Reels. And then TikTok presented in a different way, right? TikTok was all about that. You're not going to see anything else. It's just so easy to flip it and then engage, because they knew that video was the way to go for it. I remember when TikTok came out. I remember finishing my day at work, having dinner, watching a little TV. And when I went to bed, I spent an hour and a half in TikTok, just going by it. And I said, oh my God, this is addictive. However, is that the right channel for you? Now, let's analyze something. Twitter and LinkedIn recently retired the stories version, which is the same format from Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So why? What do you think is that? Do you think it's just because the format didn't work? I don't know. Do you think that everybody's going to TikTok? I think that they were not really that top. They didn't have that audience that actually consumed that format. Video is still the format, but the actual interaction is not for them. Actually, Instagram and Facebook, stories are great. I don't put a lot of money in stories. I can tell you something. If I have a web traffic campaign, I probably would do, obviously depending on my audience, but let's say, for example, I'm going to do a disease awareness campaign where I want to showcase some of our partners. They have these excellent websites with a lot of information for patients. That for me, probably I would do it in Facebook, and it will be a traffic campaign, and probably I would do good videos with experience from people that actually are on those experiences, those diseases, or in some cases are also healthcare providers. Going back to the format, I think it depends. And I think formats are going to be evolving all the time.
Interesting point, Julio. Great. What I'm learning is that this concept space and the reflection behind is very important. And all these selecting of audiences in the first phase of thinking about how to deal with social media goal related is the most important part. So then you have an analysis phase where you can select all the relevant channels important for our audience, and you have a base on which you can reflect, okay, is Snapchat important for us? Is TikTok important for us? And which content can we deliver for this specific audience in this channel?
Absolutely. And again, when I joined the corporate team, my role when I moved to Switzerland, it was to take ownership of the corporate channels on Novartis. They traditionally were managed by third-party companies and so forth. So I think this was back in 2016, and we're thinking, you know what, we need to do something about the social media thing is growing. Okay, and even though our channels were already mature at that point. So anyway, taking ownership was a big deal, and it was a big transition, but it really made a big difference. So the step one was basically to just do the overall transition and bring those operations in-house that, that's a big company. Sometimes we don't, right? So then you need to find the right talent, the right people that can actually do almost anything, and you need to be hands-on. So yes, I've been monitoring, I've been publishing, I've been doing all of that because that's just part of the job. But then is your optimization phase two. That's something that it takes time, where we just decided to eliminate channels, or just retire channels that really were taking our time, and then prioritizing on the ones that we felt that they were better for us, just on the engagement, how it was responsive, and all of that. So that took some time. So yes, this is something that is evolving. I remember Instagram was like, do we really want to be in Instagram? Well, we are probably the largest pharma company in Instagram. We have over 110,000 followers, which, of course, I'm not a celebrity, so we don't have 10 millions. But for a pharma company, 100,000+ followers is pretty good. So I think we're very proud of that.
Julio, this is great because what we usually do on this podcast, we ask people for advice in the end, right? So what could you possibly recommend, our listeners who may work for smaller, very small companies? What could they take on? But I think you already summarized that in a way, what the advice can be, right? So be aware of your goals, your target, be aware of your audiences, prioritize the social media channels, and then maybe be creative when it comes to measurement with your specific goal in mind. And I also like your comment about quantity and quality, because yes, I mean, it's easy to get to high outreach figures when you don't care about quality, right? And then you just produce, and the figures go up and up and up. But do you really accomplish your goal? And I like that a lot, Julio. So thank you very much. I think that's maybe the best advice that we can give, unless you have one that tops it all.
No, you're absolutely right. But there's only one tiny thing. For short, the approach is stick to your goal. Whatever that goal is stick to it. You need to live by your goal. The main goal must drive your messages. It's not the other way around it. I see all the time people trying to, but this is a great video. We need to use it here. No, you don't. It doesn't fit our message. It doesn't fit our goal. Very important these days, actually imperative, humanize your key messages. It's important. You need to make things human. It's no longer big company name is doing. You need to humanize it. You can say, we do it, they did it. Try to make it human. And then lastly, you said it, it's quality over quantity. You don't need to do 20 posts in a campaign. I think if you do good 3 or 4 posts, it will be fine.
Great. Thank you very much, Julio, for these.
Oh, you're welcome.
For summing up our discussion today. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Julio. I'm looking forward to our next episode in the coming weeks here at measurementmashup.de, your podcast on data-driven decisions in communications. We hope you like the show and will join us next time. Stay tuned. My name is Steffen Ruchenach and...
My name is Marc-Steffen Buchele. Have a nice day.